Hey everyone, Restart Recharge will be joining our friends from the EDU Coach Network and EDU at both FETC in New Orleans and TCEA in San Antonio. If you're going to either of those conferences, stop by and say hello.
Calling all instructional coaches. Join Forward Edge for Coaches Camp in summer 2023. Coaches Camp is packed with high-quality professional development exclusively for you. Attendees will work with like-minded coaches on creating strategies for building teacher relationships, executing coaching cycles, and building a culture of coaching and tech integration within their district. There are 2 opportunities to attend Coaches Camp in the summer of 2023. You can join us virtually June 12th through 14th, or come visit us in Cincinnati on July 27th and 28th. Please visit forward-edge.net/coachcamp to reserve your spot today.
Aloha, I'm Katie Ritter.
And I'm Justin Thomas, and this is the Restart Recharge podcast, a podcast by coaches for coaches. We bring the tips and tricks to help you in your everyday work as an instructional coach or whatever they call you in your school district.
So hopefully you're going to leave this episode with us today feeling just a little bit less on your own coaching island.
All right, so we're on to episode 2 now. Obviously, we started episode 1 to kick off season 3 with Jimmy Costas. But for this one here, episode 2, reflecting on our work as coaches is very important. Whether we are reflecting with teachers on the work that they've put into their instruction, or we're taking a look at our own coaching, we want to get the most out of how our work impacts. So this episode will take a closer look at how we can have meaningful reflection with our educators and then use it for ourselves and our coaching. So we have 2 excellent guests here with us today. The first is Brooke Conklin. Brooke is the Assistant Director of Coaching Programs at Forward Edge. She oversees the Forward Edge Coach Mentorship Program and organized the EDU Coach Network, a professional learning network for instructional coaches. Prior to her current role, she served as an instructional design coach for schools in Southwest Ohio area. She planned and led lessons for Google for Education's Certified Coaching Programs webinar series last year and authored curriculum for the program pertaining to the use of Google Classroom to promote professional learning. Her passion is for professional learning has resulted in the planning and execution of multiple professional book studies and mentorship of other instructional coaches. So welcome in a fan favorite and the first time on season 3, Brooke.
Oh, thanks, guys. I don't know about fan favorite.
No, it's coming through the feedback.
Put a poll out.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, and I have the pleasure of introducing a second fan favorite and popular guest here on the pod. We have Emily Cowan, who serves as an instructional design coach with us here at Forward Edge, and she is also one of our mentor coaches here at Forward Edge. She's a Google certified teacher, trainer, and coach. She has provided professional development and coaching to a variety of PK through 12th grade teachers in multiple districts across Ohio and in Kentucky. Prior to this role, Emily earned her degree in middle level education with a specialization in language arts and science. She was in the classroom for 6 years before transitioning to a coaching role with us here at Forward Edge. So Emily, welcome back and welcome to season 3.
Thanks. I'm happy to be here. Like Brooke, I'm pretty sure you only said that because you said it about Brooke, but we'll take the fan favorite compliment.
Listen, everybody, new year, we're going to take the compliments where we can get them.
You know, we might even manufacture compliments.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I start complimenting myself.
However you get them, it doesn't matter. But let's get right to it. So how do you lead reflection discussions with educators in their work in the coaching cycles? Is there one way you go about it, or is there multiple ways to accommodate how your educators can take reflection and feedback? I know it's kind of a hot topic for coaches to try and figure out how can I really initiate that reflection. So I thought, why not just, you're both fan favorites and you're excellent at what you do. We'll just start right off with it.
Thanks, Justin. I'll kick it off, Emily, but feel free
Sure.
to override me at any point. So coaching cycles, and I say this knowing that not every coach does coaching cycles or is provided that luxury by their district, but coaching cycles really do provide like the optimal environment for specifically reflection. So if you've been in education for a hot minute, you know that everything moves very fast.
Mm-hmm.
So teachers, especially, there's just not a lot of natural time for reflection. So in coaching cycles, you really get that opportunity to have like a cadence where reflection is built in. So you're meeting with a teacher, you're in their classroom. You're meeting with a teacher, you're in their classroom. And reflection largely happens in those one-on-one meetings. And when you think about like, how do I go about reflection and getting reflection out of teachers, because I think that that's been a challenge that I've experienced too, is like, how do I even get that conversation going and really get them to spill it all, if you will?
Yeah. And make it authentic and genuine, right? Not just
Right.
like fill out this prompt on
Yeah.
this piece of paper.
Yeah. Or how do you think that went? Like, I think it went fine. What did I not
Done.
see?
Yeah.
Right, because you want it to be authentic, you want it to feel natural, and ultimately, like, the goal of reflection, as far as like coaches go, is for reflection to become part of the teaching mindset and part of like the natural practice of every day. So one thing that's really helped me this year, when I do go in and I observe as part of my coaching cycles, or I go in and I co-teach, anytime I'm in the classroom, or really when I'm having a conversation with a teacher, I like mentally remind myself to be curious. So I know reflection is coming. I need to fuel that reflection and fuel that conversation. So if I mentally remind myself to be curious, everything I see, I'm going to question, not in like a negative way, but in a like, I wonder why they chose that particular style. I wonder why they're calling on like this group of students. I wonder why they're implementing like this type of activity, you know? So not assuming anything. We don't want to come in with assumptions. But if we're curious, or like, why did they pick that goal? Why are they focused in on like behavior right now, you know, when there's a host of other things that we could be talking about? So that's been really helpful to me, is just to be curious, and that really sets you up to ask those good questions in coaching cycles and in those one-on-one meetings.
This is why Brooke is a fan favorite, because she takes all the ideas, and then she's my fan favorite for being on the podcast, because then I can just say ditto. But
Favorite
I
dual
do
guest.
agree.
Yeah. Simple.
Yeah, but I totally agree with her in echoing the idea of being curious. One of the things I practice in some of my coaching is like the 9 whys. So when I ask a teacher a question, I follow it up with, okay, like Brooke said, like, why did you choose that? Or why is that the direction you're going? Because the more whys and the more curious I can get, the more information I can collect. But on the flip side, it's really having the teacher dig deep into reflection and think about that for themselves, which is ultimately going to help guide their growth. And the other thing that Brooke didn't really touch on, but I know is something on the forefront of every coach's mind, is that when we are leading these conversations of reflection, it has to come from a place or a person you have a relationship with. So it's really key to make sure that you're building those relationships in the classrooms that you're working in, so that reflection feels comfortable for that teacher.
Yeah, I like where you're both headed with this, and it's just reminding me so much of our season opener with Jimmy and this idea of just like really getting to know people, asking questions, like understanding their choices and where they're coming from. So anyway, I don't want to go too far down a rabbit hole there, but I think this is a really good follow-up episode to that first episode. If you haven't listened, listen after this one, because I think they go really, really nicely hand in hand together. Because what I took away from that episode with Jimmy was doing a little bit more internal reflection before like approaching teachers, to check and make sure there's not those assumptions, like you said, Brooke, so that you can truly be open-minded and curious to then help them reflect and grow.
Yeah.
Well, and even on our team, I know not that long ago, we were having a conversation about the types of questions we're asking. So of course, asking why and being curious, but making sure to put the students at the focus of the questions and not just like the teacher practice. So like, how would students feel if you did this in class? Or how would it impact students if you tried this strategy? Because then it kind of takes that pressure off the teacher.
Yeah, great tip. And you were going to say something too, Brooke.
Yeah, I mean, kind of parallel to what Emily is saying, and thinking about our framing of questions, just like a personal connection. I found myself, because one of my goals this year is to be in classrooms more, and to be better in touch with what's happening. And I found myself like doing the deer in the headlights in my brain when I'd see things going like really wrong, or like I'd see like instruction happening that like was as far from ideal as you would want. And I really had to like check myself and check the assumptions that I was bringing about that teacher. And that's like where I would start to come up with like positively framed questions. Like, I wonder how we could get the back of the room engaged, instead of thinking, I wonder why that teacher is not calling on any students this whole bell. You can frame your curiosity in different ways to make sure that your questions are framed to keep student learning and student benefits at the forefront.
Yeah, great tips. So thinking about, right, there's all these different moments for reflection. And, if it's a coaching cycle, you might have reflection that you're doing, obviously, ideally at the end of the coaching cycle, right? It's a component of the coaching cycle to reflect on the whole experience. But I think real benefit can be along the way, especially with what some of the examples you both have given when you're doing the observation or when you're along the way implementing skills. So there's just all these moments of reflection. So I'm just curious, like how does reflection differ at different moments, whether it's in a coaching cycle or maybe the teacher's not in a coaching cycle, like you said, Brooke. Not everyone's doing necessarily full-blown coaching cycles, but what does that reflection look like throughout different points of your coaching with teachers?
Yeah, I can take that one. Or at least start it. But I do look at it kind of like assessment in the classroom. So we have our formative reflection that's happening along the way, like you alluded to. And to me, that's kind of like in the moment questions, like Brooke talked about, all of these whys and these curiosities that we're having, and leaving them very open-ended because we want to leave room for growth. And, as we're going along, they maybe haven't mastered the full goal. So it's little questions that will help push them to the next level. And then the second part is kind of that like summative reflection. And I think that one is really important to let teachers internalize on their own first. So at the end of a coaching cycle, I know a lot of us practice by sharing a Google form with our teachers that ask them some like real in-depth questions on the process and the stages of the coaching cycle we just went through. And that allows them to think on their own, reflect on what they've done and answer it. And then it gives me the opportunity to review how they've reflected and come back to them and even dive deeper into their reflection and kind of help guide them through that. But I think that summative really needs to be put a little bit more on the teacher so that they aren't just kind of answering my questions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's funny. Emily and I obviously come from the same teaching background because I totally wrote down formative and summative as my reminders for conversation. But totally echoing that. Your formative reflection assessment, if you will, and coaching cycles, I think it more closely aligns with reflection. But that's like the goal of the reflection that you're doing throughout coaching cycles is to improve or to develop along the goal that you set with the educator, where your end reflection, that like formal summative reflection is more to set the stage for like longer term. So you're focusing on like how they grew throughout the entire cycle, and you're really instilling like the growth mindset for the educator, and helping them to like form this like habit of reflection. Whereas like Emily said, like you're in between that teacher cadence where you are in the classroom, you're meeting one-on-one, you're in the classroom, you're meeting one-on-one. Those one-on-one meetings are really like checks for growth and where do we go next? How do we pivot? What did you think went well? What should we like try next? So the in-betweens are a lot more focused on like development, I guess.
Incremental steps versus like a bird's eye view of the experience.
Yeah. And I will also put some exclamation points on something Emily said too. Like, we never want reflection to feel like homework at any time, you know? And in coaching cycles, like reflection is critical, but that shouldn't be a worksheet or something that you send them after the fact that they have to spend extra time doing. It should be very like conversational, and it should be collaborative, really, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, on that note, we are going to take a quick break from our sponsors. Hang tight. We'll be right back.
Who is in your coach community? The EDU Coach Network is a professional learning community designed specifically to help instructional coaches connect, learn, and grow together. With free and paid options available, there is a space for all coaches in the EDU Coach Network. Join today and access coaching content that will help you impact teaching and learning in your school. Go to www.educoachnetwork.com to join.
The Google Educator Bootcamp is a 13-week comprehensive series that will prepare educators to complete the Google for Education Level 1 or 2 certification. This series provides teachers with professional development on their own time to complete tasks that are built around showcasing their proficiency and understanding of the Google Workspace for Education tools. For more information on the Google Educator Bootcamp, visit forward-edge.teachable.com and begin earning your Google certification. All right, welcome back to the Restart Recharge podcast. I'm Justin Thomas. We have Katie Ritter as always, but then we have Brooke Conklin and Emily Cowan here joining us to talk about how you can look at the reflections through your coaching cycles or just through individual coaching, or even looking at it not necessarily from the reflection with a teacher, but on your own coaching as well. So with that in mind, how do you go about looking at your own reflection for coaching? Do you primarily use interactions with the educators and kind of see how things went, or how their feedback went at the end of the coaching cycle if you're doing those, or are there any other strategies that you have?
Yeah, so this is, I think, a little bit tricky in coaching because we ultimately want feedback from educators on our coaching, but we also don't want to survey our educators to death. Like in an ideal world, we would get direct feedback from our educators after maybe every interaction or, the big stuff. But I think that we can look at it a couple of different ways. So there are like surveys that you could put out asking for feedback. I think those are natural at like the end of coaching cycles, to put a survey out as part of the end of coaching cycles, just asking about the experience, asking about how the educator felt about your support. Obviously, you can do surveys at the end of like professional development sessions. That's very natural. But in like organic coaching outside of those formal settings, we're not necessarily going to send like a survey after I like help solve a problem in your second grade classroom that day. So I think that we have to like think a little bit outside of the box about where we get information to fuel our reflection on our own coaching. So I think some of this comes from like situational reflection and observations. I like to kind of think of it as like, what isn't going right now? What isn't like up to my standard of how I want things to be? Yeah. And what can I do, or what am I doing to contribute to that? Or am I doing enough to like support that? So when we think about that and like reflecting on our coaching and supporting educators through their challenges, I think we want to be cognizant of like not putting the problems on educators. Yeah. So when you're thinking like, what isn't going right and how can I provide better support? What we don't want to do is like, what's not going right and who's to blame? So I think that that's one form of reflection and reflecting on your own coaching program. Well, I'll take it back to like what Jimmy said in the last episode, which was like fabulous. I wanted to re-listen to it right away. But if I am wanting to reflect on my role as the coach in a building that has a culture issue, I'm going to use my observations and the situations I'm involved in to reflect on my own role and relationship to that problem. So what is problematic about the culture in the building? What is alarming? What needs work? And what am I currently doing, or what do I need to be doing to support that? And I think that that's like looking at your surroundings is a great way to reflect outside of like formal surveys and formal feedback that you might get.
Yeah. I just want to, I'll pivot to you in a sec. When you just said the thing about Jimmy, the biggest thing that jumped out to me from like a reflection standpoint with that was this whole idea of like a reluctant teacher, right? Like, and I think that like really hit me different for those of you Gen Zers out there listening. But you know, like I have said that and thought that, not necessarily like negatively of the teacher, but just like they're reluctant to like implement this LMS or like change their lessons. You know, they just had a different LMS. Now they're switching here. So they're reluctant to trust it, like whatever. Like, and I've kind of typically in my own, like always put that onus on them. And just the way he said that, like maybe they're not reluctant to do whatever it is. Maybe they're reluctant to work with you. And it was like, yeah, you know what? Like maybe they really are. So anyway, that just when you said that, Brooke, kind of reminded me of that moment I had for myself that I've been thinking about and reflecting on, like how we even phrase our language internally, trying to get support to better help our educators, like even just thinking differently about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it takes a degree of vulnerability
Yes.
For your reflection. Because like ultimately reflection is a conversation with yourself about like what's happening in your control, right? So if you can, when you're thinking about that reluctant educator and being like vulnerable in your reflection, like what is behind the scenes? What am I doing to support this person? And really like keeping yourself at the forefront and not necessarily like placing blame on the other person.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Pivot over to you on this one.
Now that I totally derailed the question.
Yeah.
No, you're totally fine. No,
Let's get this back on the rails, Emily. Get us back on track.
Despite reflection being such a personal and internal activity, one thing that I feel has really helped me with my reflection is actually utilizing other people to help guide me in my reflection, just like we're doing for our teachers. So, I mean, I know not every coach out there is fortunate enough to be on a team with 17, 18, 19 other coaches. But I think finding someone who is in the same role or in a similar role, whether you find them on Twitter or through the EGU Coach Network or wherever you can make those connections, I think some of the most valuable reflection that I've had for myself is the conversations with my team. So when I'm struggling with something, whether, like you said, whether it's a reluctant teacher or just a challenge that I'm having getting started with certain coaching initiatives, when I'm able to talk to my team, they can kind of reflect back to me what I'm doing, what ideas they have, and it just furthers my development and my growth. So I really think that while it is so personal, I think opening up reflection to like being a partner activity is really, really beneficial.
Yeah, Emily, I'm so glad you said that because I had written it down to say after you two had answered. But, you know, when we think about the context of a coaching cycle, I mean, you guys just said earlier in the episode, like how important that reflection is along the way of what you're doing and not just this one big reflection at the end. So, you know, but we don't have a coach. We don't, you know, the coach doesn't have a coach as someone to like stop and prompt you and get you to think about those things. You know, and that really just kind of shameless plug. I mean, that's the whole crux of why we developed our coaching mentorship program, was because you know the coach themselves almost needs a coaching cycle on coaching, essentially, right? So I'm so glad you said that because I couldn't agree more with you in pairing. You know, I think good coaches are hungry for data points, like you mentioned, Brooke, to collect and like get as much feedback as we can because all we want to do is help and get better at our job typically in this role. So I think having like pairing all of that information to look at and reflect, but pairing it with just that kind of like informal extra ear that can pick up on things that you don't even know to ask to collect, right? So I think that's super important. So I'm glad you said that. Moving into thinking about some of those reflections that you guys have had, and whether it's conversation or data points you're collecting, what are maybe some big takeaways that you could share of things that you have learned through your own reflection that might really have led you to find more success, that might be like really good nuggets to share with some of our listeners?
I'll go first. And this is, I mean, I hate to be like a broken record, but I do think that this has helped me be very successful in reflecting. And I think especially in today's climate in education, it's kind of a circus out there, guys. It's not a good one. It's not a good one. And I think it's very easy to be surrounded by negativity and things you might not be able to control. And like Katie said, coaches, we just want to help. We just want to make things better. We want to make student learning better. And it's easy to get bogged down by what you can't control. So for me and reflection, I've tried to make it more part of my like internal fabric to think about like what is not going right and what is my relationship to that and how can I influence change for that. You know, like I might not be able to solve everything, but what can I control to change the landscape? And I'll give like a kind of an example of that recently, actually this week. That's going to be maybe news to Katie, but
I love finding out news on the pod.
I led a professional development session for a school that I had not been to before.
I knew you were doing that, Brooke.
You did,
yeah.
But
the next part.
I was warned ahead of time that culture was not great there, and in my brain, I'm thinking, yeah, like culture isn't great anywhere, no big deal, whatever. We'll roll with it and lead PD, and I get in there, and it was really bad, really, really bad. And I would try to crack jokes. They fell flat. I embarrassed myself several times, and it was a cold room, guys. And then at the end, I put out my feedback survey. I should have known better. Should have held that one back, but I didn't. I got some feedback, and there was one particular teacher that just went in on their administration on my feedback form.
Yeah.
And they were like, had all these complaints, like admin didn't tell them to bring their computer, so they were unprepared. Admin threw him under the bus at the end when he apologized about the engagement. Admin did that, and it was really bad. And there were a couple of other responses that like made me confirmed the bad culture. So in like reflecting on my role, because I can't change that, and I am going to do a couple more sessions with them later on in the year, but I can't change that. I can't change their culture for them. But what is in my control is what I can do in those moments, you know? So that's been like part of my reflection, is just thinking about like what isn't working for them, and what is my relationship to them, and how can I support them with what is in my control. So and like I said, the answer is never them. Like my answer to that question is not they aren't working, they aren't prepared, they aren't this. It's like, how can I change what I'm doing to like better meet the needs in their environment?
So I'm going to put you on the spot because I know this happened 2 days ago, so you may not even have an answer. But in that situation, because while you may be in a unique situation that you are walking into a district for whom you do not coach full time, in that situation, like many of our listeners may be feeling like they are trapped in this situation of negative culture that's maybe making teachers not want to work with them or see them as something extra, right? So we definitely have listeners that are kind of feeling like trapped in this situation that they can't control because they're not the admin. So what would maybe be like just one tangible thing that you think, since you are not the administration, you're walking into this culture that seems pretty downtrodden. What's like one thing that you think when you say like my relationship to this, that you could like positively impact that for next time?
Yeah, so I think that like in any culture problem like this one, the role of a coach is unique because you have to have relationships with both sides, right? You have to have a relationship with admin, professional enough to like for them to renew your contract, and then you also have to have a good relationship with teachers in order to impact change with them. So what I can control in reflecting on that, and if you are a coach that that's the culture you go to every day, is that you can advocate for the needs of the teacher, and make those known to administration, and recommend solutions that like help achieve the initiatives that the admin are wanting to see, but like are keeping the needs of the teachers at the forefront. And I think that that's one of the skills that makes a coach like a great coach, is that they're an advocate for teachers, they're an advocate for students, but they have the close relationship and they're in the inner circles of administrators typically, to like make those shifts happen. Does that answer?
Does. Okay. Yeah, it does. No, I think that's a good little tangible example of how you can address something when you're feeling a little out of control.
Yeah.
So, what about you? What are some maybe big takeaways from reflection that you've had that you feel like would be beneficial for other coaches?
I don't know how you follow that. But I guess I don't have like one big idea here, but something that I've talked about with one of our colleagues recently is just our job is to impact the student learning experience. Mm-hmm. And we show up every day for the students. So for me, reflection, like my constant reflection, looks like, is the work that I'm doing with teachers impacting the student learning experience? Is it making education better? Is it engaging the students in a way that they weren't engaged before? And if I'm not doing that, then I know that like I need to do better to hold teachers accountable or to push them to make the learning experience better. And if I'm not doing that, I'm not doing my due diligence for students, which is why we're in education. So it's not some big revelation, but it is something that just kind of like grounds me in my practice and kind of guides the decisions that I'm making with the teachers that I'm working with.
Yeah, well, sometimes we all need something to keep us going in those hard moments. It's good to have that like center to when you do feel yourself going off track, or you do feel yourself like, my jokes are not landing here. Maybe I'm not, it's good to have that center. I just want to add something that I saw on Twitter this week, and her name is Laura Williams, and on Twitter it's Mrs. Williams 21C. And she said, being a coach doesn't necessarily mean you know more, but it does mean you care a whole lot about your people's success. And I just loved that so much for in this
Full
role that we do.
Here.
Yeah, I know, right? Like I loved it. I think I've retweeted it 3 different times because I'm like, I just love this so much because I think we take on a lot as coaches. And I think sometimes coaches feel like, maybe part of their reflections, like, I don't know enough about this. Like, you don't have to know everything. You just care. And to me, like, I would share, like, my big takeaway of reflection for other coaches has always just been, like, there is no finish line to like our work and our skill set. Like we're always just trying to be better and learn and adapt, and there's just no finish line. So just know like you're never going to reach this like pinnacle of success. We just have to like, we're striving for it, but there's always going to be a new challenge. There's always going to be like new shifts in the environment. There's always going to be something that's affecting what we do. So just like keep going and just keep caring about your people, and you'll find success.
It's like when we talked about with Jimmy last the episode with carry the banner, right?
Yeah.
For the district, for the building, for the teachers, and the students. Just carry what is going on that is so well, and carry that banner to really promote that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we know how we like to end things here on the Restart Recharge podcast. So, Brooke and Emily, what are your top 3 tips for reflecting on coaching to better accommodate the educators in your school, district, or building?
Do you want to go first?
Sure. I'm having a hard time on the spot coming up with a third one, but I would say that
we'll
my
take
first
2.
one, I might have a third one by the time I finish, but to just reflect frequently, and to use that, just like we talked to teachers about using data points to drive instruction, use the data points of your reflection to make changes in your coaching practice, right? If we don't do anything about the data we're collecting, then we're doing a disservice. My big thing is finding someone to reflect with, whether you're reflecting internally first and then just finding someone to like talk through it with. I think that that's one of the most impactful things for me. And I think something that I need to do a better job of, so maybe it makes for the perfect tip, is to kind of formalize your reflection process. I talked a lot about how it's not super formal for me and I have this like grounding question, but I think that like something that would benefit me is to formalize that, to set checkpoints throughout the school year with specific questions to answer, to really guide my reflection.
Great.
Yeah. I would say number 1, reflection is about you, not them. I think that's true when you're guiding teachers to reflect on their practice. Like their reflection is about them, not the students, Also, like if you are reflecting as a coach, it is about you, not them. Like in my bad PD example, like my reflection is not all these teachers came unprepared. It's like, what can I do to like make sure like expectations are more clear next time from my vantage point? My second tip is to be curious. That will help guide more meaningful questions to help your educators reflect. Also will help you reflect on your own personal coaching. And then my third tip is to be vulnerable. And this kind of tags onto what Katie was saying, but I wrote down accept imperfection, but aim for improvement. So if we can accept that we're never going to reach the finish line, we're never going to be perfect, our educators are never going to be perfect, our students are never going to be perfect, but we can always improve. And if you can be vulnerable and just accept those imperfections, you're going to have a lot better reflective conversation.
I love it.
Awesome.
I'm feeling inspired.
I'm feeling a little toasty.
It is very warm in the podcast room for those who are not with us live.
Probably rent this thing out as a sauna. Awesome. Well, okay, Brooke and Emily, thank you for joining us here on this second episode to really get things going here on season 3.
Yes, glad to have you both back.
And we were trying to come up with a cool name for this. I won't exactly describe all the stuff that happened before that because it might get some folks like Emily upset, but that's okay. So what's funny about it is that we actually, Brooke, put in kind of, why don't you explain what you did here since?
Yeah, so the question was thrown out, what should we name this? Something funny, because we're at the end of our brain power on the work week. And so I was like, well, I don't want to spend time thinking about it. So I'm just going to plug in the key takeaways in the description into ChatGPT, which was working for me this morning. And it spit out like 5 different options. Most of them I liked. One of them I really liked, but I wanted to tweak the end a little bit. So that is how we landed on a podcast title.
And that would be
little preview.
The mirror on the wall. How can I be a better coach to all?
Boom.
Boom.
Mic drop.
Mic drop. And it's a perfect segue because the next episode, we're actually going to have Mateus Holze come on, and he's going to talk about ChatGPT, AI in general, kind of help us wrap our head around this because if you open up any social media in the education world or just been in the education world, I'm sure you've heard of ChatGPT. So even if you're not really fully sure what is going on with it.
If you just opened up the internet.
Yeah, you just open up the internet.
No matter what world you're in.
Exactly. It's probably come up at some point in time. I swear when it first kind of came out, I think it was kind of like you like brought it up, and then it was like after that, it was like everywhere. It was like, I don't know if it maybe I just hadn't seen it yet or what, but like it was like one of those things where it's like,
you're a trendsetter, Katie.
Yeah, look at that.
No,
Katie.
I was one step ahead when it was introduced to me, and I was so caught off guard. I'm like, I can't let this happen to anyone else.
So luckily you came back and made sure we were all set with it. But it's going to be a really mind-blowing episode on how...
It is mind-blowing. I can say that because we've actually already recorded it. So I'm just going to go sit in the dark for a while and process everything. So tune in for that episode. So with that, be sure to subscribe to Restart Recharge wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you have some time, we'd love rating and review so we can do a little reflecting on what we're getting and giving for this podcast. Or you can do that by following and reaching out to us on social media at RRCoachCast.
And as always, feel free to let us know if there is any topics that are on your mind. We'll be happy to discuss them here on the Restart Recharge podcast.
Yes, so press the restart button.
Recharge your coaching batteries and leave feeling equipped and inspired to coach fearlessly with the Restart Recharge podcast.
A Tech Coach Collective.